I never thought much of the old house we lived in. It was big, a bit creepy, but nothing ever happened there that made me truly afraid. The attic, especially, was a place I avoided. It wasn't the most inviting space, and the window up there had been nailed shut for years. I remember my dad saying something about how dangerous it was to have it open, but that was just one of those things that never really mattered. At least, I thought it didn't. The attic door was always locked, but I had never been curious about it. Until that night. It was late, probably around 2 a.m., and I was sitting in my room reading a book. The rain outside was heavy, the kind of rain that makes everything feel muffled, distant. But then, from upstairs, I heard something. A faint creak, like a board shifting under weight. I stopped reading and listened. Nothing but the sound of the storm. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling. Old houses make noises, especially on rainy nights. But then the sound came again. Louder this time. A slow, dragging sound, like something being scraped along the floor. I immediately stood up, my heart racing. Was it an animal? A stray cat, maybe, stuck in the attic? I pushed the thought away. It was just my imagination running wild, right? I tried to ignore it and went back to my book, but the sound kept repeating, each one more distinct than the last. It was coming from the attic. I couldn't sit still anymore. The air in my room felt thicker, almost suffocating. I put my book down and walked toward the door. I was trying to calm myself down, telling myself that I was being ridiculous. But the curiosity was eating away at me. What was making that noise? As I walked down the hallway, the house seemed quieter than usual. The usual creaks and groans of the old wooden floorboards felt louder now, as if the house itself was awake and listening. I reached the stairs that led up to the attic, and a strange chill ran down my spine. The light in the hallway flickered as I reached for the attic door, and I hesitated. There was something off, something I couldn't place. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I grabbed the door handle and slowly turned it, half expecting it to be locked, but it opened without resistance. The air was even colder now. I stepped into the dark attic, the flashlight in my hand casting weak shadows on the walls. The attic had a musty smell, filled with old furniture covered in sheets and boxes of forgotten things. But something was different tonight. The atmosphere felt wrong. That's when I saw it. The window. It was wide open. My heart skipped a beat. The window that had been nailed shut for years, the one I had never even thought to check, was open. I stepped closer to it, my pulse racing. I could feel the cold air coming from outside, but the window itself was intact. The nails were still in place. I didn't understand how it could have opened. I reached out to touch the frame, but the moment my fingers brushed against it, I heard a soft whisper. It wasn't in a language I recognized. It was low, almost a hum, but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. I froze, not knowing what to do. The whispering continued, coming from the far corner of the room. I turned my head, but I didn't see anything. Just shadows. I couldn't stop looking in that direction, as if something was drawing me toward it. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but I couldn't tear myself away. I stepped back, trying to make sense of what was happening. The whispering grew louder, and my flashlight flickered. It wasn't just the wind or the rain anymore. There was something in the room with me. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it, an overwhelming presence, like eyes watching me from every corner. I turned around quickly, expecting to see someone, but no one was there. I backed up toward the door, my mind racing. I needed to leave. But when I reached for the handle, it wouldn't turn. I yanked at the door with both hands, panic starting to set in. It was stuck. The door wouldn't open. I turned around in desperation, searching for a way out, but the attic had never felt so small. The shadows seemed to close in on me. The whispers were now clear and urgent, like voices just behind my ears. In the far corner, something moved. A shape, indistinct but undeniably there. I froze, unable to move. The figure was tall and thin, almost skeletal, its form barely visible in the dim light. It wasn't human. I could feel it. The cold, the weight in the air, it was all around me. The figure moved closer, its steps slow but deliberate. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The room was silent, and I was left with the sound of my own breathing. I turned toward the window again, the only source of light, and that's when I saw it. Something had moved outside. A dark figure, standing in the rain, watching. My body went cold. I couldn't understand what was happening. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mind screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the dark figure outside the window. Time seemed to stretch and warp, like everything in the attic had frozen. The whispers started again, but this time they were louder, more distinct. It was as if the figure outside was calling to me, its presence pressing down on me like a weight. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My body was paralyzed with fear. The shape outside shifted, its outline becoming clearer in the dim light. It wasn't standing still anymore. It was moving closer. My breath quickened, and my chest tightened with panic. I tried to back away, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, though. The figure was coming closer to the window. I had to escape. I turned to the door again, desperately pulling at the handle. It still wouldn't budge. I screamed, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, and my voice seemed to be swallowed by the thick silence in the attic. The whispers grew louder, now mixed with strange, guttural sounds that made my skin crawl. They were coming from every direction. I could feel them closing in on me. I ran back to the window, hoping to find a way out. But when I looked, the figure outside was gone. My heart skipped a beat. Had I imagined it? No. I knew I hadn't. The air was colder now, almost icy, and the shadows seemed to twist in unnatural ways. I couldn't explain it, but something was wrong. The attic felt smaller, the walls pressing in on me. The whispers grew again, this time accompanied by a heavy, dragging sound. It was coming from the far corner of the attic, the same place I had seen the figure earlier. I forced myself to look. There, in the shadowed corner, something was moving. It was a person, or something like one. Tall, thin, its limbs unnaturally long, it was dragging itself slowly across the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The figure's face was hidden, but I could feel its eyes on me. It wasn't just a feeling, it was as if its gaze was digging into my soul. I turned away, unable to look at it any longer. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I was suffocating. The whispers turned into a low, monotonous hum, vibrating through the walls. The air around me was thick, heavy with a presence that made every hair on my body stand on end. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking as I reached for the door again. This time the handle turned. I pushed the door open, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, everything changed. The hallway stretched impossibly long, the walls narrowing as if the house itself was shifting, closing in on me. The whispers followed, now clearer than ever, like they were in my ears. I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck, and I turned around. The attic door was still open, the dark space beyond it stretching further than I remembered. The figure wasn't there, but I could feel its presence. I could feel it watching me, even though I couldn't see it. I ran down the hallway, the house around me feeling unfamiliar, like it was no longer the place I had grown up in. It was something else now, something twisted. I reached the stairs, but as I descended, I felt the steps under my feet shift. The wooden stairs were now slick, like they were made of ice. I slipped, my body crashing against the banister. The fall felt endless, like I was falling through the very fabric of the house itself. My mind screamed at me to get up, to keep moving, but my body wouldn't listen. I was stuck. When I finally hit the bottom, the house was silent again. The whispers had stopped, but the silence wasn't comforting. It was oppressive, like the air was thick with something just beyond my reach. I scrambled to my feet, panic rising again. I had to leave. I had to get out of this house. But when I turned toward the door, it wasn't there. I blinked, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door, the one I knew so well, was gone. The hallway stretched out in front of me, but it was different now, distorted. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with an eerie rhythm. I turned back toward the stairs, but they weren't there either. The house had changed. I didn't know where I was anymore, but I knew one thing. Whatever was in the house with me, it wasn't going to let me leave. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I stood in the distorted hallway. The silence was deafening, oppressive. The walls were no longer just walls. They seemed alive, breathing with a slow, rhythmic pulse. Every time I took a step, the floor seemed to shift beneath me, and I struggled to keep my balance. The house felt like it was alive, like it was watching me. I couldn't escape it, couldn't escape whatever was pulling me in deeper. I turned back toward the stairs, but they had vanished. In their place was a dark, endless pit that seemed to stretch into the very foundations of the house. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I had nowhere to go. The whispers returned, louder now, filling my ears with an overwhelming hum. I reached out to the walls, desperate for something solid to hold onto, but my fingers passed through the air like it was nothing. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. The house was shifting around me, warping in ways I couldn't comprehend. Every room, every hallway, every doorway I tried led to more darkness, more distortion. I could hear the dragging sound again, growing closer. The figure. It was coming for me, I knew it. But I couldn't outrun it. The house itself was holding me in place, suffocating me with its presence. I ran, my feet barely touching the floor as I moved through the house. It felt endless, like I was running in circles. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if they were all around me, in my head, in my ears. The hum turned into a voice, one that wasn't quite human, one that didn't belong in this world. It was calling my name, pulling me back toward the attic, toward the darkness I had left behind. I didn't want to go back. I couldn't. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me toward the attic door that had reappeared behind me. I tried to stop, tried to resist, but the force was too strong. The whispers became words, clear and unmistakable now. "Come back," they whispered. "You're ours." I didn't know what that meant, but the terror in my chest grew, choking me. I reached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The moment I touched it, the house seemed to inhale, the walls groaning as if in pain. I opened the door, and the attic was there again, but this time it was different. The room was completely dark, as if the light had been sucked away. The window was still open, the cold wind howling through it, but it felt like a trap now, a portal to something far worse. The figure was in the corner again, but this time I could see its face. Or at least, I think it was a face. It was pale, empty, with hollow eyes that stared straight into mine. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. Only the whispers, louder now, as if the house was speaking through it. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, stolen by the very air around me. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind me with a deafening crash. The air in the attic thickened, the temperature dropping to an unbearable chill. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The figure started to move toward me, its limbs stretching unnaturally long, its fingers reaching out to grab me. My mind screamed in panic, and I knew that this was the end. Suddenly, a burst of cold air filled the room, and the window slammed shut. The figure stopped, frozen in place. The whispers grew silent, replaced by an eerie stillness. I turned around, confused. And there, standing in the doorway, was a person. A real person. My mother. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Get out of the house," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now." I didn't question her. I ran. I ran out of the attic, down the stairs, and out the front door. The moment I stepped outside, the house behind me seemed to exhale, as if it had been holding its breath. The air was heavy with tension, but I was free. I didn't look back, not even once. As I walked away, I heard the whispers one last time, far off in the distance. But they were fading, like a dream I could no longer remember. I don't know what happened in that house that night. I don't know what I saw or felt, but I know this: I never went back. And I never will.